Good evening and welcome to The Core, coming to you from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. I am Gadria Ahmed. Ochanya Ogbanje from Benue State was only 8 years old when her father and son started raping and sodomizing her. Her young body could not take the abuse and she developed vesico-vaginal fistula, meaning she could not control her body functions and was discharging feces and urine uncontrollably. At 13, she died as a direct result of the horror inflicted on her by a father and son duo that were essentially members of her family. The two were husband and son to her aunt, who was supposed to look after Ochanya, who had lost her parents. Tragically, her story is not an isolated one. In Kontagora in Niger State, cleric Abdullahi Abubakar sodomized 37 boys, students put in his care. According to UNICEF, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys have been sexually assaulted before they turn 18. These harrowing statistics are reflective of the seriousness of the problem facing the country, and yet very few victims get justice. Of those who survive, very few get the help they need to deal with the trauma inflicted on them. In today's edition of The Core, we look at rape, sexual assault and violence, its impact, and what we are failing to do to protect women, boys and girls from sexual predators. But first, this report.
This is Gidom Madara Bypass, a popular street in Maiduguri, especially because of the local ranch where people from different parts of the city come to buy fresh milk. That was all 22-year-old Hawa Muhammad wanted to do one fateful evening. On that day, she was accosted by a stranger whom she simply ignored. She was only a few meters to her destination, and with the street lights shining brightly, she never anticipated any danger. But things happened really fast after then, as narrated by Hawa herself.
I was passing by the veterinary area just by the dump site when a group of men called me, but I ignored them. Then one of them commanded me to stop, and I still ignored him. He hit me and I fell on the dump site. Then I began to scream for help. He told me I was wasting my time because according to him, all the people there were his friends. And that's exactly what happened. Initially, it was one person, then 4 others came, and they became 5. Then we started to struggle. A tricycle rider who saw us stopped and tried to help me, but he was overpowered by the men, so he backed off. Then they took me down all the while I was screaming. 3 more people joined them. 2 held my hands and 2 held my legs, and they took turns raping me until I lost my voice and my vision.
Everybody was worried in the house, but there was nothing we could do. Early morning, I got a phone call from the police. They said they want my attention at, I don't know, Gonge side. I can't remember the name of the police station. So I went there and I saw her.
Hawa, like several victims of sexual abuse and violence, is still too traumatized to step out of her home for fear of the unknown. In Nigeria, gender-based violence remains a challenge that significantly constrains women. A 2015 UNICEF report showed that 6 out of every 10 children in the country suffer 1 or more forms of physical, sexual, or emotional violence before they reach 18. More than 70% experience this violence repeatedly. 1 out of 2 suffer physical violence. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys have experienced sexual violence. Also, 1 in 5 boys and 1 in 6 girls suffer emotional violence. The Nigeria Demographic Health Survey in 2013 indicated that 28% of women in Nigeria aged 15 to 49 have experienced some form of physical violence, and about 45% of that number never sought help or told anyone about the incident.
In the camps where these women are, they were secluded, they were rejected even by their own families, they were stigmatized and then kept in one side of the camp. In fact, they never associate with other women in the camps.
Those who have been sent out to protect this woman, who have been mandated to protect the women and girls in the IDP camps, are actually the perpetrators of sexual and gender-based violence, engaging these women in survival sex, where they have to where they give sex in demanding for food.
Aka dauke mu aka kawo an yi releasing namu an kawo mu IDP kan Bakasi. Gwamnati ya je ya zuba mu, a gaskiya abinci ana ba mu, but ba a kula da mu. Muna ganin challenge da yawa. Security da suna gadi mu ba su bar mu ba. An bata mana future mu, an bata mana tarbiyyar mu da iyayen mu suka ba mu.
The harmful practices of child marriage and female genital mutilation are prevalent across the country. Trafficking in women and children, which is endemic in Edo State and Nigeria's northeast geopolitical zone, has further contributed to a steep rise in violence targeted against women and children. The social media has been flooded with an increased number of stories of gender-based violence in Nigerian homes, schools, and religious organizations. Prominent is the Me Too movement, which seeks to break the silence among victims of sexual abuse and violence. The movement also pressures the relevant authorities to take action against those behind the acts. This has heightened publicity, which has led to a rise in activism to put an end to the abuse. Eliminating all forms of abuse against women in Nigeria will take some time, but time is running out. Raising awareness and seeking political support is just the first step in keeping Nigerian women safe.
On our panel today to discuss the problem of sexual violence and assault in Nigeria, Director Legal and Prosecution of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, Mr. Abdulrahim Oputo. Sir, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Also joining us is the National Program Coordinator of Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Group, ROLAC, Malam Danladi Plang. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
The founder, Braveheart Initiative, an organization that works with survivors of sexual violence, Ms. Priscilla Osioboifo, is also here. Thank you, ma'am, for coming. And finally, a writer who focuses on women's rights and social justice, and also a rape survivor, Ms. Olutemi Adegbe. Thank you for coming. We are also joined by a distinguished studio audience, including Dr. Adamu Jatau Noma, who is here representing the Minister of the FCT. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
Now, let me start with you, Ms. Adegbe. How did you feel listening to, the people that were in that video that we just saw?
Well, besides being a rape survivor, I happen to be a woman who has female friends, and that sort of story is not at all unusual. So it's maybe the specific circumstances, such as women in IDP camps being targeted by guards, maybe those kinds of circumstances are specific or unique, but the overall story of being violated by people who have authority over you or who you're supposed to be taken care of by, that's not at all unusual, and I have heard stories like that very, very often. One of the things about coming forward as a survivor yourself is that other people who have survived this type of violence then feel able to share their experiences with you. So it's an unfortunate thing that this sort of narrative is not at all surprising or new.
But when we hear women like you talk and survivors like you talk, you almost seem to be saying that this is actually really widespread.
Absolutely.
Rather than being something that is an anathema and a one-off.
Oh, absolutely. There's a story that I used to tell in workshops or conversations that I have, more formal conversations, about being in boarding school in a dorm of 19 women, girls. We were all under 16. And there were only 2 people in my dorm who hadn't experienced sexual violence. And it was a boarding school with girls from all over the country, completely random, as you might imagine. And there were 19 of us, and only 2 had not had some form of experience of molestation or abuse or assault. So it's really, really common. And I think that the denial of how common it is part of the problem.
I mean, we listened, Priscilla, to the statistics that said 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 and 1 in 10 boys before the age of 18. And we listened to people like Timeye who are talking from personal experience. In the work that you do, are you finding evidence of what you are, what we are hearing, that lots and lots of women and children and boys are actually victims of sexual violence and sexual assault?
Yes, I do. And just last week, Tuesday, we have another recent case of a 7-year-old child that had just been sexually violated. And these are weekly occurrences. Of course, we know that reportage is not equal to the occurrences, because we also know that from the data that have been made available, for every number that reports, you have about 8 that go unreported. So even the current statistics that we have may actually be far more.
How do we compare, Malam Danladi, in terms of the prevalence of this heinous crime vis-a-vis, say, other African countries or other places in the world? I want to try and get a sense of how bad is our problem.
Well, unfortunately for us, we don't have any systematic way of gathering data. Most of what we hear are anecdotal evidence, or perhaps people doing surveys. It is only now that we're beginning to, gather data in a more systematic manner, in different ways, really, whether they are statistics from courts or statistics from what we call the sexual assault and referral centers. Just to give an example, currently we have about 11 of those centers in the country in 10 states. And from the data they have between 2013 and June 2019, they have about 9,200 cases that are reported to those centers. And if you can imagine a country of 36 states and only 10, and those centers are only located in the urban areas, and then you have that figure. If you go to the courts as well, we have 2 courts that are designated to hear sexual offenses in Lagos. The last data I saw, one of them has about 600 cases.
Waiting.
Yes,
right.
In one court, So it's widespread. If we look at data and situate it within the context that, it's picked from just a small part of the country. But that is not to say that we don't have those cases in other countries. South Africa and in the US too, you have those cases. Okay. But the sad thing about ours is the fact that we don't make that conscious effort to deal with the situation. Okay. They've mentioned the issue of denial, which is widespread. Many times people don't want to talk about it. Even when it's reported, you will find that family members are the ones that will compromise the case. So it's really, really difficult, to address the situation, given the fact that it's widespread across the country.
Okay. Let me bring in an agency which is sort of almost at the forefront. Although you're not directly responsible for dealing with sexual violence and assault, you deal with trafficked people. And I understand that there is a correlation between trafficking and sexual, shall we say, exploitation. What is your own data showing you regarding abuse in the country and the prevalence of the problem?
Thank you so much. As it were, the agency NAPTIP, where I work as Director of Legal and Prosecution, deal on the trafficking of prohibition of trafficking in persons. But in addition to that, since 2015, the agency has been mandated to implement the provisions of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. So that is our added advantage. And since then, we discovered that a lot of Nigerians are now speaking out. The law has actually given them that courage and confidence that yes, government is there to listen to them and to listen to their issues. We have received well over 300 cases reported to us relating to violence against the women and children. And now we have over 50 cases pending, that is rape cases that are pending in court. We have gotten 3 convictions relating to rape issues, And on daily basis, I call it at least twice in a week, we receive a report of rape cases. And some of them are coming from the schools around the city, and some are coming from many homes. You know, Abuja has a lot of slum areas, a lot of, people where people are highly concentrated.
But you're not suggesting that rape and sexual assault are only prevalent among people who are poor and disenfranchised, and no, that's not what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying that it happens, around those areas more, but then it's also happening within the city center. Of recent, we have to go to a particular home, particularly in Gwarimpa, to be able to rescue some of these children who are being violated. And what I'm trying to say that awareness has actually increased because the law is there. We do a lot of public campaign, to enlighten the public that the time of silence is over. It is now time for you to come out and report, and that we have rapid response school team that can come within less than an hour to come and rescue any girl or any particular child in such situation.
Timmy, how easy or difficult was it for you to speak up, and what was the reaction to your verbalizing of what happened to you? What was your experience?
So my experience was, I would say, disappointing but not surprising. People find it much easier to think and talk about sexual violence as an abstract concept and to acknowledge its existence in the abstract. But then when they're confronted with real people and specific incidents, and more importantly, specific perpetrators, then things start to sort of fall apart. Because then we have to take the conversation from ideas to actual action. And because sexual violence is so prevalent, I think many people feel powerless or imagine that they're less powerful than they are, and they have less of an ability to actually affect the situation. In my experience, what happened was, the reason I came forward was actually not directly linked to the assault. I came forward because I had ended up on a broadcast program. Somehow the director or the producer put me on the program as the person who assaulted me. It was completely coincidental, and I mentioned it to them because the program was about sexual assault and toxic masculinity.
And they brought a perpetrator to talk about it.
Unbeknownst to them, because obviously perpetrators aren't walking around with, sexual violence on their forehead. So this is a person who's in the media, and he was brought on to talk about, evolving masculinity away from violence. And I informed the producer of the program about the irony of bringing on this person. This is the guy that
raped me, that assaulted me.
And their response, this is an international broadcasting corporation, and their response was basically, well, we made a mistake, but because by this time the program had been recorded, my segment was recorded separately from his, but then spliced together in editing. And they were like, well, there's nothing we can do, essentially. I asked them to edit it. They said there's nothing we can do. I asked them to take it down. And that sort of false helplessness repeated itself from the broadcasting corporation to the man's employer.
Did it make you feel impotent and violated again?
All over again,
ways?
Absolutely.
Right.
Because it's, when you experience the violation, it's one thing for that to happen in a private space, and you think maybe if somebody could have helped me, they would have. But to then be outside of that situation and to know that people do have the power to do something about it and still refuse to, then you no longer have the comfort of the idea that maybe somebody would have helped you, because people who do have the power often draw back from actually taking decisive steps. And then they're like, yeah, well, if X, Y, and Z other thing had happened, maybe. But the thing is, this is the situation now. You do have the ability to enforce some kind of consequences, so why don't you? So that's the element that was disappointing, but not surprising, because to take action against one perpetrator in a country where sexual violence is so widespread means, for instance, within this corporation, that man is probably not the only person who has assaulted people. If they take action against him, that might mean that they have to take action against whoever else people then feel emboldened to name as perpetrators. And it creates a burden of responsibility that perhaps people are not ready to actually bear.
Okay, and we will talk about that burden of responsibility when we come back from this break. Don't go away.
Must demand accountability of our government and justice for Ochaya and every child that has become a victim of sexual violence in Nigeria.
The legislature at state and federal level need to work on the law. Work on the law to impose life sentence without any variation on whoever is culpable caught doing this.
The systematic gender-based violations, especially sexual violence that women and girls in the IDP camps have suffered and continue to suffer, is linked to weak institutional and legal frameworks for entrenching gender equality in Nigeria.
Many homes have been broken, and the girl-child education is seriously threatened in areas that witness the crisis. With this scenario, let me stress that we are expecting much from the resource persons at this workshop. Among others, they should critically address all the angles to the humanitarian issues. In particular, they should help in offering workable solutions that will go a long way in restoring the dignity and hope to our traumatized women.
The House knows that gender-based violence, such as rape and other forms of sexual abuses, has assumed serious dimensions globally and in Nigeria. The prevalence of rape cases is estimated at 80%, with the children and even babies not being spared the scourge, while the prevalence of incidents of rape among adolescent females is between 11 and 55%. Also note that the United Nations Children Education Fund, UNICEF, has observed that 1 in 4 Nigerian girls must have experienced sexual violence before the age of 18. The House should call on the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice to prepare a national policy framework to guide the implementation of Sexual Offences Act that will provide further certainty to the law regarding the age at which a person can consent to sexual activities.
Do you think that women can speak out when they are being abused for the fear of sending them packing to their father's house? Don't I know that it's a taboo that when you have left your father's house to marry, then coming back again to say somebody has you are driven out from the home? If you don't address this and put a stop to the for it to stop the perpetrator from perpetrating this act, you know what trauma means? Lives with the children for life.
Welcome back. Before the break, Madam Damiladi, we heard Timei there talking about the burden of responsibility. So let me ask you, who is responsible in this country for ensuring that women, children, boys and girls are not assaulted? And if they are, that they get justice and they're looked after and, you know, they get the help that they need to deal with the trauma. Because listening to survivors like her, it would appear as if no one, really.
Well, and actually, everybody has a responsibility. If you begin to break it down, given what she said, and then also the story that we just watched, let's pick it up from the top. In terms of law enforcement, first, in almost all the states, we have laws, penal systems.
Okay, so let me actually ask you, I've been wanting to know, what is the penalty for rape, for sexual assault, for sexual violence? Is there like a standard penalty?
It varies from state to state, but the VAP Act provides for life imprisonment, and there are different circumstances under which the sentence could be reduced. If the person is a child of 14 years, I think it's about 14 years imprisonment. In some certain circumstances, it's 12. I think the minimum is 12, between 12 and life imprisonment. Different states have their own.
And has the VAP Act now been domesticated everywhere? So can it be implemented across the country, or is it just some states that have done it and others haven't?
Some states have currently domesticated, I think about 5 or so.
Just 5 out of 36?
Anambra, Edo, I think Delta, Ikiti, Lagos already has, you know, I think those are the few. FCT, of course, the federal one applies here. So it's not every state that has the VAP law.
Okay. So there's no framework in a lot of these states that have not domesticated this bill for actually actively pursuing prosecutions against people who are perpetrators?
What some of them have tried to do is, rather than domesticating the VAP wholesale, they have amended either their criminal codes or their penal codes, to increase the punishment for rape. Some of them is life imprisonment, some it's 14 years. So depending on what the state thinks is best for them, they decide on whether to adopt wholesale or to just amend their penal code system and increase the punishment.
Priscilla, have we made any progress at all?
The progress has been made, although it's slow. And I keep telling people that you may see the gain to be very minimal, but in the field of work that we do, every single gain is significant. As an organization, we work with rural communities, and we are situated in Igara, in Edo State. And in the past 9 years of intervening in sexual violence, we've actually intervened in over 100 cases from just that local government. Edo State have 18 LGAs, and this is Akoko Edo LGA, it's just one. And out of these hundreds that we've had, and when we mean intervention, not just the cases that have been reported. When we say intervention, it means the cases that have been reported. We've started the comprehensive approach, which has like 3 phases. The first one is the medical support, ensuring that the preliminary medical screenings are done, preventive treatments, for example, post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV/AIDS, emergency contraceptive for
making sure
prevention of pregnancy, and now we even do vaccination, because just like this recent case, I can't disclose here, but the rapist actually has an STI and is a viral infection. So the child or the survivor needs to be vaccinated.
So you're active in one local government out of 18. How many groups like yours exist? Do you have any idea? I mean, do we have people, a lot of your groups supporting and doing the sort of important work that you're doing, or is there a depth?
Number.
Yes, you have like you don't
gross,
have enough.
Gross limitation. So a lot of people provide spaces for people to speak up, but they don't have the resources to provide the services, and that has been a big issue. So you have
increasing conversations now.
So you have several organizations that create safe space for young people and women, even men, to speak up about their abuse. They document this, send it to either the Child Protection Networks or the State Ministry of Women Affairs. Some cases even go to the State Ministry of Justice. But in terms of service provision, and especially access to legal services, very few people are able to provide that support. And I said we have made progress because we've successfully convicted 11 sexual offenders as just one organization. So as our last count, in 10 cases, we have 11 convicts, because in one of the cases, it was a gang rape, so we had multiple convicts in one of these cases.
So that is really good progress. But let me bring in, because NAPTIP is also now trying to launch what you hope will be a tool that will make a difference, and it is a sex offenders register, a national sex offenders register. Tell us about that initiative and what you're trying to achieve with that.
Thank you so much. Under the Violence Against Person Prohibition Act, Section 4 provides for the sexual offenders register, particularly for those who have been convicted for rape cases. In view of that, we have to partner with a lot of partners, including ROLAC, supported by British Council, to have a web-based database where we can be able to key in those who have been convicted for sexual offenses, particularly rape.
And that database will be available to everybody, or just to law enforcement and NGOs, or will the members of the public be able to go online and look at the names of people convicted?
There are gradients of accessibility to the database. The database is so much configured in such a way that, first and foremost, for those who have been convicted of sexual offenses, particularly rape, the entire public can have access to it.
Okay.
The entire public. It is open
to everybody.
To everybody. Once you are convicted, everybody has access to know about you, who you are, everything about you. Then, if a matter has been reported against you, as a pedophile or as a suspect, there are places where it will be. But such places are not accessible to the entire public. Those can only be shared by law enforcement agencies who would like one information or the other to know particularly what stage was this person ever interviewed for this kind of offense. So not entire public can have access to that. So but we are really trying to leverage on all circumstances to ensure that the methodology of naming and shaming of this particular set of offenders can be made public so that the entire world will know about it, because it's going to serve as deterrent to others. Once you know that whatever level it is, even if a matter was arraigned in court and you are arraigned in court and eventually the matter was thrown out, their record will be there. But the entire public cannot have access to it. But any time, any other level can access it and to come out on the show.
Okay, I'd like to involve members of the audience now in the conversation, and if I may, maybe start with Dr. Adamu Jata Onoma, who is here representing the Minister of the FCT. The statistics that I saw just before coming here seems to suggest that a lot of sexual violence and assault takes place in schools. And in the last I think in the last year or so, we've heard stories coming out of the FCT. I remember one about the Kuje School of the Blind, where there was an allegation that a young boy was being seriously violated in that school, and a few other things here and there. So is there does FCT do you guys have a policy around sexual assault, sexual violence in schools, and then generally?
Well, thank you very much. Now, first of all, the basic objective of a teacher going to school is to make sure that he raises a child that becomes a very useful member of the society. Now, the teacher has a control over the child only when he is in the school, or if something happens to the child and it is reported to the school administration. Now, we'll try as much as we can to make sure that children are sensitized. Children are sensitized, very, very conscientized, to make sure that they guard against some of these abuses on children. That is what we do. And how do we do them? We do them on assembly ground. Children are sensitized. They are told what to do, what not to do. They are told what to guard against. For instance,
but FCT as a sort of an administrative area of the country does not have policies that are distinct and different for their schools.
No, we use the national. We use the national document. Yes.
All right. So let me then introduce the representative of the Minister of Education, Dr. Lydia Gigina. I didn't want to get it wrong, guess what? So again, schools seem to be like a place where a lot of sexual assault takes place. Again, the Kuje School of the Blind example, and a few other, we've heard cases of university lecturers who've been caught red-handed, harassing students for marks, all of that. So from the perspective of the ministry, is there a policy that is different and distinct from the national policies we've heard about? And what are you doing to sort of sanitize our educational spaces?
Thank you. The Federal Minister of Education...
Hold your mic up, please, a bit, yes, so that people can hear you. Thank you.
The Federal Minister of Education has zero tolerance for sexual assaults and violence. There is a policy on sexual assaults and violence, from the Federal Ministry of Education, because the Federal Ministry of Education collaborated with UNESCO and other state ministries of education to prepare rules and regulations guiding the schools along sexual assaults and violence. And also within the Federal Unity Colleges, we have what we call guideline on offenses and punishments. And under Section 5, titled Immoral Behaviors, there are laid down rules and regulations.
So you're pretty satisfied with the way schools are set up to deal with these problems, or do you think there's room for improvement?
Currently, it depends on the nature of the offense. At times, it might be a student being involved with another student, like cases of homosexuality or lesbianism. You know, the children usually are cancelled. At times, you have to involve their parents, and they have to be suspended or expelled, depending on the gravity of the offense. Yeah. But if a teacher is involved, the teacher immediately will be suspended from the school environment. Then the disciplinary committee will be set up involving school-based management committee.
So I don't know if it's a nomenclature issue, but you do realize that there are people who will take great offense at you mixing up rape with homosexuality and being a lesbian, because homosexuality technically is an act between consenting adults, the same thing with lesbianism, whereas rape is when you do something that doesn't have consent. I'm just saying that so that we have clarity about what we're discussing. I don't want things getting mixed up. Yes, yes. Okay. So carry on, please.
So within the school, we normally have advocacy, sensitization during the assembly, either by the principal. And the Federal Ministry of Education in schools have set up, you know, peer educators and HIV clubs, whereby the children are encouraged, you know, to say no to such things, and also encouraged to speak out anytime such things, you know, happen to them.
Okay, I'd like to speak to Khadija. You are involved with the Arewa Me Too movement, which basically got its, I guess, inspiration from the Me Too movement in the United States. Tell me about the work you're doing and some of the challenges you've been facing in trying to advocate for victims of sexual violence.
Okay, good evening. The Arewa Me Too hashtag started on Twitter as just a hashtag. So it later on morphed into an online campaign. Well, it was a certain girl that came out to tell her story about how her ex-boyfriend was assaulting her. So it got a lot of attention, and it made a lot of other people come out to speak about how they were being assaulted or they had been raped, and some even went to the extent of mentioning this rapist. So it created a lot of controversy, and well, that was when the originators of the hashtag realized there's really a lot to be done offline. So the campaign was taken offline, and so we started like a movement of our own, trying to pair victims, because we had a lot of people coming out to tell us their stories, and we couldn't just leave it there. So we turned into like a platform where we pair victims with the necessary services like medical assistance or legal aid and psychosocial therapy. So we became like a link to between the victims, and so we tried to create an organization because we needed an organization whereby we could work under the umbrella of. So we had we started the process of registration, and then we realized, well, whatever we're trying to do has been done or is being presently done by a lot of organizations. So we figured it was better to just serve as a platform to bring together all the organizations working around sexual and gender-based violence, because we feel a lot can be achieved when we collaborate. So that is... I
mean, the North is not necessarily known for being able to look inward and be sort of honest about some of its problems. What has been the reaction to you guys trying to get a conversation going around sexual violence in the North?
Well, it has been quite disappointing, because even the people, the caliber of people you expected won't really have a problem with people coming out to speak about these issues. It was really disappointing seeing them the way they were just, the backlash was too much.
I keep hearing about this, the pushback.
Yeah.
When sort of victims of assault victims of violence, or even the people who are supporting them, try to sort of get a conversation going. And I hear this not just from the Arewa Me Too movement, but even people like Timeye, who are sort of writers and activists writing. What is going on? Why are we so uncomfortable with dealing with what is a very, very serious problem that is affecting our children, our sisters, our brothers?
You know, sexual violence, I keep telling people, it's a core patriarchal issue. It's an issue of control. And, you know, and one reason why I started pursuing justice, and from what you are saying, is the fact that the impunity of the rapists themselves. And one key thing that the Sexual Offenders Register is going to do is to help us curb impunity of sexual offenders in the country. Because they feel they can do it and get away with it. And because they've been doing it and getting away with it, they just want to continue. And don't forget that some victims or survivors are re-victimized. So it's a core issue. As you encourage people to speak out, you also begin to think, do you have the support system when they speak out to ensure that when the backlashes come, she's just speaking now. I just lost 2 senior program officers. We were intervening in a case, and you had my team, the young girl, Gift Alonge, who was sexually violated by the father for 2 years. And I said her case is a classic case of a sexual and reproductive health issues that our country, Nigeria, have. Because from her case, you could see sexual violence happening, physical assault, psychological abuse, unsafe abortion, teenage pregnancy, and death, all wrapped up in one teenage rural adolescent girl in Nigeria. Because on their way to court, they had an accident. And my 2 senior program officers, may their souls rest in peace, Rhoda Brimo and Promise Ezekiel, and the survivor herself, who is now a victim, because as an organization, we only use victim when they are dead. As long as they are alive, the terminology we use is survivor. And her uncle. Now, the support system we are looking at, this backlash, is why I keep re-emphasizing the role her uncle played. When the incident happened, almost all community members all drew back because they were like, this rapist already have a profile. And that's just what statement she was trying to make. Sometimes the profile of the rapist also determine a lot of outcome of what will happen. When the person is a big public personality, what happens? If he's a pastor of the church, if he's the imam of the church, and if he's gift father that is a herbalist, a renowned herbalist. So everybody shielded away. The only person who agreed as a community to stand by her also died in that unfortunate accident. And that was why I had to pursue this hard-sought justice that will God forgive.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we speak a little bit more about the things that we can do individually as communities, but also as government and organizations to try and see if we can get a handle on the problem of sexual assault, violence, and rape. Don't go away.
We must demand accountability of our government and justice for Ochaya and every child that has become a victim of sexual violence in Nigeria.
The legislature at state and federal level need to work on the law. Work on the law to impose life sentence without any variation on whoever is culpable caught doing this.
The systematic gender-based violations, especially sexual violence that women and girls in the IDP camps have suffered and continue to suffer is linked to weak institutional and legal frameworks for entrenching gender equality in Nigeria.
Many homes have been broken, and the girl-child education is seriously threatened in areas that witness the crisis. With this scenario, let me stress that we are expecting much from the resource persons at this workshop. Among others, they should critically address all the angles to the humanitarian issues. In particular, they should help in offering workable solutions that will go a long way in restoring the dignity and hope to our traumatized women.
The House knows that gender-based violence, such as rape and other forms of sexual abuses, has assumed serious dimensions globally and in Nigeria. The prevalence of rape cases is estimated at 80%, with the children and even babies not being spared the scourge, while the prevalence of incidents of rape among adolescent females is between 11 and 55%. Also note that the United Nations Children Education Fund, UNICEF, has observed that 1 in 4 Nigerian girls must have experienced sexual violence before the age of 18. The House should call on the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice to prepare a national policy framework to guide the implementation of Sexual Offences Act that will provide further certainty to the law regarding the age at which a person can consent to sexual activities.
Do you think that women can speak out when they are being abused for the fear of sending them packing to their father's house? Don't I know that it's a taboo that when you have left your father's house to marry, then coming back again to say somebody has you are driven out from the home? If you don't address this and put a stop to the for it to stop the perpetrator from perpetrating this act, you know what trauma means? Lives with the children for life.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, we were talking about the difficulties that people have getting justice as a result of communal attitude, particularly when you're dealing with very powerful people. There are people, when you talk to them about sexual assault, say as a society, there's a way in which we behave and condone certain things that almost make it inevitable that perpetrators of sexual assaults and violence will feel emboldened. And we're lucky we have the Director of Gender at the FCT. Ma'am, I want to ask specifically about some of the raids that is conducted, that are conducted in the FCT, where we see arrested women who end up getting violated, really assaulted, because you see them naked, their clothes are removed and all of that. And there's a sense in which you feel a community that allows that to happen in the name of sensitizing the streets and in the name of the law is almost inevitably saying women can be assaulted and it is okay.
Thank you very much. From the FCT point of view, it's an unfortunate incident that happened. There's a task force that comprises the police and other security agencies that did the raid. We're not happy with it, but we're doing something about it as a responsible
you are
body.
engaging to try and put a stop to it, or what exactly?
Well, to put a stop to the raid is put on hold for now. We've not been raiding. The FCT or the task force has not been raiding the centers or where these sex workers are found. They've put a hold on it for now, so that we come up with a much more human-faced activities. Yes.
Okay. All right. The gentleman behind you has something to say. Sir, please, your name, and quickly, we are running out of time.
Yes, my name is Antonio Gunle. I'm the Chief Press Secretary to the FCT. Now, well, I'll be speaking on behalf of the FCT on this matter. Just like the Director of Education said, we have a zero tolerance policy on sexual assault in our schools and indeed in the society. Just like
have you tried to actually prosecute teachers under FCT who've violated these rules that you have?
Yes, you see, as a matter of fact, the ones involving the teachers are for the school for the blind. The moment that incident happened, the very next day, the permanent secretary went to that school. Immediately, those teachers were resident in the school. He said they must leave that school immediately, and immediately also placed on suspension. The security authorities were brought in to be involved in the matter, and then because they are civil servants, the civil service rules now kicked in. Right. So as I'm speaking to you, those two gentlemen have been suspended, and I'm sure that, frankly speaking, they're going to be dismissed. Okay. There's no question about that.
The lady in green in the middle over there, please, can you help me pass the mic to her? Can we make it quick? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chinyere Eyo, and I'm the Executive Director of Sexual Offences Awareness and Response Initiative. I just want to say, as important as litigation and law enforcement and all of that is, it's important we also begin to focus on the psychosocial well-being of the survivors, because if that is not given prominence, we find out that a lot of them will not be able to function in society. And sometimes we even see where some of the survivors or the victims end up becoming perpetrators themselves because there was no trauma management, there was no help received, you know. So it's important moving forward that we begin to look at a holistic system where, as much as we are pursuing that the perpetrators be brought to book, but that the survivors get the help that they need.
Okay, the woman here, yes, the gentleman here. Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mercy Kwabi from Stand to End Rape. I was just going to talk about the pushback because I felt like enough wasn't said on that. And I feel like in Nigeria, we have a general culture when treating every other crime. And that culture is just basically, we don't have value for human life. And if you can't put value on human life, then you can't really say somebody is worth fighting for. And that's like a major problem. So we spend so much time saying, oh, the victim, why were you there? What were you doing there? What were you wearing? Why were you in that scenario? Instead of saying, don't do this crime. This is wrong. You can't, without consent, it's either you rape somebody or you have sex with them. There's nothing like consensual sex, yes. So we spend so much time invested in that because we don't have value for human life in general. And I feel like the way we treat, when we talk about sexual violence, we cringe because of this nature of the crime. Nobody ever says, oh, an armed robber, what if he was hungry or his family was hungry? No. But then when it comes to sexual violence, we're always like, but this is a pastor, or this is a teacher, he has a family. We're always making excuses. So we need to get rid of that culture.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up and by coming back to the panel and starting with Mr. Danladi and working my way back. Yep. In terms of just what are the must-do for us as societies, as communities, if we're to get a handle on this? And please keep it as short as possible. Okay,
two things really. Number one, I need to talk about this issue of law enforcement. It is very important because it is
and
what
I think
drives
it's important I
impunity.
mentioned that we did invite the Nigerian police. They said they were coming. They cancelled at the last minute. I then asked for a statement from Mr. Mba. I was promised one. It never came. Okay, sorry, sir, to interrupt.
So I said law enforcement is important because where you fail, in enforcing the law properly, it drives and encourages impunity. Where you fail in enforcing the law properly, it is difficult for you to get convictions in court. So a good law enforcement system is important for us to really handle this situation. The second one is we talked about creating more awareness. Creating more awareness within our homes, within our communities is very important so that people will be able to come out and talk about what is affecting the communities in terms of sexual assault and violence. The last one I will need to include.
You have to be really quick.
Yes, it's ensuring that our medical facilities provide for rape victims.
Priscilla, quickly.
Comprehensiveness of services that survivor gets, especially preventive services that are available, because it's really double jeopardy for a rape survivor to get up being pregnant and becoming HIV infected that could have been prevented. The second one is coordination. We need better coordination of programs, not just at CSO level, which always happen. They keep having networks for us. But what's the synergy between the CSO and government? What's the synergy with other people? And that's one success story for Brevard, because for example, all our cases are prosecuted by the police. Okay. It's synergy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ma. We are happy to have this legal instrument called the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, which we are calling on all other states to really key into it and adopt it. Because in it is a very comprehensive approach with which we can really tackle this problem. Apart from the issue of law enforcement arresting the suspects, prosecuting them and having witnesses to testify for our cases, there are other social activities available.
And I'm assuming that you will be advocating for other states to all domesticate it.
We are already doing that with all our partners.
Okay, sir.
So the law is comprehensive enough, and we believe once it is being implemented in that holistic manner, this issue of rape issue and other sexual offences will be reduced.
Okay. Time, final word.
I think the thing I would like to say is just that people need to, one, believe survivors, and two, take whatever actions they have the capacity to, which demonstrate absolutely that the biggest priority is the safety and well-being of the survivor, not the circumstances of the perpetrator, not his family, not his job, because people tend to make all of these excuses and say, if we actually take action, then we will destroy the life of the perpetrator. But the perpetrator has already attempted to destroy the life of the survivor. So everyone has some capacity to take actions that flip the script and prioritize the survivor above the perpetrator. So believe survivors and prioritize the well-being of survivors over everything else.
Okay, so we've run out of time. Thank you so much to my panelists, to those who came to the studio to take part in the conversation. Join us for the next edition of The Core in October. On behalf of Channels Television and Daria Media, I'm Kadria Ahmed, wishing you a very good evening.